Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking with me through that break. If you are just tuning in, we've talked about a lot today. We talked about Caitlin Clark and her incredible performance, defeating LSU in the Elite Eight to move on to the Final Four for the second year in a row, putting up 41 points in the Elite Eight game. She almost had a triple-double in that game. It was incredible to watch. So much growth for that sport. I haven't seen so many people talking positively about women's basketball ever before. So very excited for that. Excited to see what the rest of those Final Four and championship games draw off numbers-wise. In their second segment, we talked about the no-hitter that happened last night. The Astros threw their 17th no-hitter as a franchise. First no-hitter for Ronel Blanco. Magical night. We love no-hitters. But in this third segment here, we're going to transition into the NFL. We're going to talk about some second-year quarterbacks that might be looking to make a jump. Who's going to make the bigger jump? Who's going to be the breakout second-year quarterback? We're leaving CJ Stroud out of this. So before I get too far into this, we're not talking about CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud has cemented himself as an elite NFL quarterback. He is not going to be as part of this conversation. So for those, while I'm trying to discuss who's going to be the best second-year quarterback, saying CJ Stroud does not count. This is best second-year quarterback, not including CJ Stroud. Because that just wouldn't be a very good conversation, now would it? But we are going to break down two guys that I think two guys that are going to be competing for it, I think, and Will Levis and Bryce Young. Two guys who are starters, kind of have brand new situations. They both have new head coaches, both have new weapons. It's going to be very interesting. We're going to break all that down. But before we do, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message will pop up on the bottom of the screen here. We'll have a little discussion about what you had to say. You can control the content of the show through your tips and donations. So if there's a burning question you want to ask me and you want me to get to it, talk a little bit about it here on the show, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net and leave a tip or donation. Once again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. But like I was saying, we are going to talk a little bit about who's going to have the bigger year two jump. Will Levis or Bryce Young? And taking a look at their stats from last season, Will Levis, he didn't start the full season. He threw for 1,800 yards, 8 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Bryce Young did start the full season. He threw for 2,800 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. Quarterback rating is probably the best way to compare them. Bryce Young had a 73.7 and Will Levis had an 84.2 quarterback rating. Takes a little bit of the missing game sample size out of that right there. But both of these teams have added in the offseason. Both of them have added at receiver. Both of them have done a really good job adding at the offensive line. Both of them have brought in new head coaches. And these guys now basically get to hit the restart button. They get to throw their rookie season into the trash and say, hey, we're going to try again. This one's for real. And I think Bryce Young needs that bad. There's been lots of stories coming out about Bryce Young, or I guess the situation surrounding Bryce Young, saying stuff like they did a whole install and then 2 days before the season started, after preseason is over, they said, you know what? All that work we did with our rookie quarterback, teaching him a new offense, getting him ready, getting us ready for the season. Let's change that. Get that out of here. We're going to do something else. It's a great recipe for success, don't you think? Throw everything that you've worked on out the window, start scrap. Probably shows why the Panthers were the worst team in the league this year. But now they get a new head coach. Dave Canales, brought in from the Bucks. Quarterback whisperer, some are calling him. He had a resurgence with Geno Smith. He had a resurgent Baker Mayfield. What can he do with Bryce Young? Very, very excited to see how this goes. But there are also some weapons that they brought in. Like I said, they both really did it. Both of these teams, the Titans and the Panthers, focused on improving their offensive line, and they did a really good job because both of those teams were kind of in similar situations. Uh, they both got new head coaches. They both have second-year quarterbacks now. They both don't. They both just did not really have much of an offense or a defense last season, and they've done a really good job of shoring that up. Tennessee has made a lot of moves. They've had a really nice offseason. They brought in Calvin Ridley to be that wide receiver 1B, 1A with DeAndre Hopkins. I'm not sure exactly who's going to get that wide receiver 1 role, but there is a lot to look forward to in that offense. They did lose Derrick Henry. That's going to be a big loss, but when you're redesigning it, the way that it was under Mike Vrabel, the Titans were run heavy, play action, kind of suited not really to Will Levis's game. I think that this new coaching staff has an opportunity with a young quarterback in Will Levis that really showed some promise. You remember back to that Dolphins game, he led a comeback against a solid Miami defense. Now, it was injured, but it's a solid Miami defense nonetheless. He leads a comeback, one of the best comebacks of the whole season, in a game that the Dolphins desperately needed to win so that they could, not go to Kansas City in round 1 of the playoffs like they did. But Will Levis was able to lead that drive, shows a lot of promise. Bryce Young, on the other hand, he was in a worse situation, just downright a worse situation in Carolina. It wasn't the kind of place that anyone could reasonably succeed in. You might be able to throw Patrick Mahomes in there, and he might be able to succeed. But when your number one weapon is a geriatric Adam Thielen, who had a really good season last year, but he is gone now, and the offensive line is just sticks waiting to get pushed over, it's a mess. They have revamped that offensive line, which number one priority on the offense. And then they went out and they got Deontay Johnson, a really good separator at wide receiver for kind of a bag of chips. It's a great trade by them. Gave away a corner that probably wasn't even going to make the roster and get a wide receiver 1 to go opposite whoever they want. They don't have a first round pick, but they do have that 2-1, the first pick in the second round, and they can do a lot of things with that. There's still going to be a lot of good wide receiver talent. You're not getting that top tier, that Marvin Harrison, that Rome Odunze, that Malik Neighbors, but they do have a chance to go get another guy. If we're looking at these two quarterbacks, though, I'm very excited to see what Will Levis can do. I thought what he did in a limited sample size last season, I think he's going to make the bigger jump. Bryce Young, I think he will improve. I think we're going to see why he was touted as a number 1 overall pick. I don't think he's going to quite live up to that number 1 overall pick. I don't think he's going to be better than CJ Stroud, for instance. But I do think he can be the kind of quarterback that I'm not trying to make a comparison to how he plays, but the kind of quarterback that Baker Mayfield is. The kind of quarterback that will win you games, but not the guy that you're like, oh, I want to give you all my money. I want you to be my franchise guy. He's going to be kind of that limbo quarterback. Better than average, better than most, but not like we need to back the Brink trucks up to keep you kind of guy. Will Levis, on the other hand, I think he flashed his potential a lot. Now, he did have better weapons. A lot of times he was just kind of saying screw it and throwing it up to DeAndre Hopkins down the field, which is not a bad decision when you have DeAndre Hopkins, but you can't be doing that. And there's a reason that he had a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He holds the ball for way too long, and that's a big weakness. That's something that can be fixed. But that's going to be the big thing that I need to see out of Will Levis. Bryce Young, he needs a better supporting cast. He got it I just don't think he has that elite talent that a guy like Will Levis might be able to show. I do think Bryce Young is going to have a higher floor, but a lower ceiling, basically. Will Levis could barrel out. He might never learn how to make a decision quick. And that's the biggest factor. If he can learn to make those decisions in 3 seconds instead of holding it for five, he is going to be a much, much better quarterback than he was last season. He just needs to get that. That just comes down to coaching. How comfortable you are with the playbook, how comfortable you are with your receivers, and bringing a guy like Calvin Ridley in to take some distraction away from DeAndre Hopkins, so it's not just Nick Westbrook-Ikine on the other side. It should help. I think Will Levis is going to make a bigger jump in year 2 than Bryce Young is, but again, that's not to say anything bad on Bryce Young. I believe Bryce Young can still be a very good quarterback in this league. I think he can be a quarterback that leads the Panthers to the playoffs. Maybe not next season. They still have a lot of holes. A lot of holes. But he can be very good. We've seen what he can be, at Alabama. He showed some flashes. That Packers game, he played really, really well. So it's not like there's no reason to believe that Bryce Young can't win a game. Because he can. I've seen it. They didn't end up winning that game, but I've seen him march down the field, get them into that position to get these game-winning drives. He's shown potential there against the Packers, but I'm very excited for both of these young guys in the next season coming up. I think both of them can be very good. I think both of them have a shot to be have a shot to jump into that franchise quarterback tier. Not the elite quarterback tier, but the franchise quarterback tier. I do think Will Levis is more likely to make that jump in year 2 than Bryce Young is, because I just think he's a better supporting cast around him, and I still don't trust David Tepper and the Panthers front office. If you switched Bryce Young and Will Levis on opposite teams, I think Bryce Young would have succeeded last year. I really do. Will Levis on the Panthers is just not something that would work. Period, point blank. It would not work. He wouldn't even get the chance to start in year 2. So I think Young is a better is a more stable quarterback. But with Will Levis's arm talent, he can be better. So I think Levis is going to make that jump. He just needs to make quicker, better decisions, and having those elite weapons on the outside should help with that. But anyway, in our next segment, we're going to transition out of the NFL, talk a little bit about hockey. We don't talk a lot about hockey here on this show because I know a lot of you guys aren't as big into hockey, but love hockey or not, you have to admit the hockey playoffs are some of the most entertaining playoffs in all of American sports. Anything can happen. So many upsets. It's always wild. It's at the same stage as the NBA. The playoff races are heating up right now. So we are going to get into some of the more interesting races coming up next in our 4th and final segment. Stick around. We'll be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.